Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this discussion of DISA's global reach and impact, delivering capabilities to the point of need. I'm Don Zimmerman at NetApp, and NetApp is honored to be a supporting partner of AFCEA's TechNet Cyber. Our speakers today lead DISA field commands and operations as they deliver combat support around the world across a range of military operations. As the intelligent data infrastructure company, NetApp equips global warfighters to operate their data wherever that data needs to be, on-prem, at the edge, or in JWCC, with a single operating system, one set of APIs, zero trust policies, and AI-ready capabilities backed by the industry's only anti-ransomware guarantee. Our moderator, Army Colonel Clifton Schmidt, is the Deputy Director for J357 Operations Plans and Exercises. He commanded the 62nd Signal Battalion at Fort Cavazos and has developed expertise in sharing battlefield information with coalition partners. He has also served on the Army staff in JFHQ Doden, on the Combined Joint Task Force, and in combined task forces in deployed environments. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Clifton Schmidt.
Good afternoon. It's really great to be here with you guys, and I appreciate you attending and being a part of this discussion with us. Today we're really going to highlight some of the ways DISA uses its field offices and field commands to really maintain that close relationship and maintain mission relevance with our combatant commands. DISA is mandated to fulfill combat support functions across the range of military operations. This is also this morning. The DISA director really talked about our identity as a combat support agency and our focus on the combatant commands. And as we look across the strategic landscape while using the DISA Next strategy to really kind of be our compass as we look out across time and focus with unity of effort and unity of action in the agency. And our field commands are vitally important in that endeavor. So DISA has a field office or a field command embedded with each of the combatant commands, and they're really an organic personification of DISA's dedicated support to those combatant commands. In terms of size, our field commands are generally a little bit larger than our field offices. However, our field commands also have field offices that are assigned to their region that they provide oversight of as well within their area of operations. So with that, it's always great to be with these field commanders in person when we get the opportunity to do that. Otherwise, obviously, you can see based on their geographic dispersion, we're generally talking to them via VTC or some other means. So when we get the opportunity to be with them, it's always great. And I'll pause there because I'd like each of them to just kind of introduce themselves real quick. And if you could, just kind of share with everybody your name and kind of how long you've been in the position at this point, if you could. Starting with Jared Snotter.
I'd say good afternoon.
Please join us for the networking reception on the exhibit floor from now until 5 p.m.
Good afternoon, Colonel Jared Snotter. I'm the DISA Central Field Commander, and I took the position in July of 23, so right on a year.
Good afternoon, Colonel Jared Veneta. I'm a DISA Pacific Commander. I took command in July of 22.
All right, good afternoon. My name's Colonel Diane Klein. I'm the DISA Europe Commander. I took command about 2 years ago, and in about 2 weeks, I'll be heading off to take a position in NATO.
Good afternoon. I'm Colonel Mick McDaniel, Commander of DISA Global Field Command at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, and I took command in July of 23, so coming up on 1 year.
Thanks. So, also we talked about the DISA Next strategy this morning. The director talked about that in his keynote speech. We're talking about it a lot in the agency, and there's 4 strategic imperatives in that strategy. The first one is to operate and secure DISA's portion of the DoD network. The second one, supporting strategic C3. The third is optimizing the network, and 4 is operationalizing data. So when you think of things like operate and secure DISA's portion of the network, you guys heard all the different field commanders kind of introduce themselves in their areas, but you heard DISA Global last, and with a name like DISA Global, they're not necessarily assigned to a particular combatant command. And really there's a whole lot of teamwork between DISA Global and the field commanders that are part of this panel just based on the individual mission and needs of the combatant commands, and then DISA's globally integrated and interconnected fabric based on the vast network that DISA operates. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Colonel Mick McDaniel to kind of talk through with the team here and with the rest of the audience your mission and kind of your broad priorities and what you focus on.
Sure. Thank you, Colonel Schmidt. DISA Global Field Command, our mission is simply to deliver and defend DAO DISA, so Domain Area of Operations DISA. And what that means is, on the deliver side, we perform NetOps functions for the global transport and IP backbone networks, amongst a host of other services that are related to that. And then we do that in support of our fellow field commands and other partners in the agency. So that's what we do on the NetOps side. On the security side, on that defend side, we operate the DISA's 10 internet access points, and we analyze in real time all of the traffic that traverses those access points. And then in addition, we are the CSSP analysis element for about 450 plus mission partners. And so that's what DISA Global does from a perspective. But bottom line, we operate in support of all of the combatant commands, and we do that through our fellow field commands, in partnership with our fellow field commands.
Thanks, and I just ask each of you just kind of talk through and give the audience kind of a good understanding of your mission and kind of where you're focused right now in terms of broadly with your priorities.
So DISA Europe, we operate, maintain, and defend the European portion of the DODN. And with that, I have 3 field commands. We're standing up a European field command to provide support to our main mission partner and customer, the EUCOM Combatant Command. We also have a UK field office in UK, England, out at Corsham. They interface with our special partners, the UK Defence Digital, which is our counterpart, our DISA counterpart with the UK government. So they do the care and feeding of that relationship, and also work some memorandum of understanding actions with them as we work with the UK partners. And then we also have a NATO field office, which provides the national technical experts to the NATO Communications Information Agency, which is the DISA for NATO. And so they provide not only technical expertise to that in supporting NATO and its circuits, but also we provide technical engineering and support to the US NATO circuits around the SHAPE Belgium area and also across the globe. So our priorities are, our current top priority is support to the defense of Ukraine, in support of Ukraine, given the operations going over there with the Russian aggression against Ukraine. With that, our main priority is to provide support to the EUCOM J6 and its components in the mission of a changed security environment in the European theater. About 10 years ago, things were pretty good in the European theater, and after the Russian aggression, there is much more coalition partnership going on. There is much more interaction with NATO, and the EUCOM itself is looking much more closely across the theater where they need to bolster their defenses, and with that, where we, as DISA, need to extend our circuits and our connectivity to the customer. And then lastly, we're working on network modernization, along with training and enabling our workforce. Over to you, Jared.
Thanks. So before I answer, can you put your hand in the air if you are not from DISA? Okay. All right, I'm speaking mostly to you then. It's a DISA all hands here, I guess. Okay, so yes, Jared Veneta, commander of DISA Pacific, located in Ford Island, Hawaii, right across from Pearl Harbor. My main mission, similar to Europe, is to operate and defend the Pacific portion of the DODN. So think from the shoreline on the west coast of the United States all the way through to the coastline of China and Russia, covering down into Australia and Japan, Korea, Okinawa, Guam, all those areas. So to do that, I have 6 field offices located throughout the theater. While I'm headquartered at Ford Island, we have a field office in the Indo-PACOM J6 located up at Camp Smith. I have a field office in Alaska, and that's kind of a strange one. I share that mission with DISA Northcom, because it's part of the Homeland Defense mission, but it is part of Indo-PACOM as well. Moving west, I have an office in Guam, which is a very key strategic point and the furthest west U.S. homeland. So it's important for logistics and it's important for our defense of the homeland mission. And then I have an office in Yokota, Japan, down in Okinawa, Korea, and then I think I've covered them all. Within my Guam office, we support the Philippines and Australia, and my Japan office supports Singapore. So we cover a large chunk of the Pacific with only 6 field offices, but it's covering a big piece of terrain. Now, Colonel McDaniel mentioned he does that global support. That's kind of the tier 1 work for DISA. The field commands, we're doing that tier 2. So we take the cutover and are focused narrowly on our theater of operations and working with the combatant commands. Most of my day is divided between current operations and future operations. So the current operations piece is operating and defending what we have in place right now, supporting Indo-PACOM and the theater service components. All the circuits, the data centers, the networks, everything that DISA provides, from mobility all the way up to our long-haul transport. The future ops piece is the second part of that. Understanding what the combatant commander, his J6, and what the theater service components and their 6s want and need for the future fight. And that's what we're aligning ourselves to, is the pacing threat, which is China. We're keeping an eye on Korea, we're keeping an eye on Russia, who all operate in our theater. But China is our pacing threat. Every document that we have in the US government aligns us in that direction. So what do we need to do to build and what we call set the theater to support the Indo-PACOM operations against the pacing threat? And those operations are divided into 2 areas. In competition, it's integrated deterrence. Everything that Indo-PACOM is doing to basically flex our muscle and prevent conflict. And there is a lot of activity on a daily basis happening in the theater. The other half of that is our O plans. What do we have to do if we shift from competition to crisis and conflict? And DISA has responsibilities across that entire competition, crisis, and conflict continuum, and there are C2 requirements across all of that. So we support that entire range of mission and then building out to what we're going to need in the future. Thanks.
So good afternoon. So DISA Central, obviously our portion of the DODN is the central region, the Middle East, as everybody's very familiar with. But we also have some vested interest. CENTCOM, while most of its components are not in the theater any longer, they're now at Shaw Air Force Base, the Combined Air Ops Center, Army Central, Air Force Central. So we got to keep a close eye on Shaw. And then CENTCOM also has a backup location in Tennessee at a reserve base. But predominantly focused forward into the theater, do a lot of engagement with the components, because that is obviously a live operations theater right now, especially since October. Our key priorities right now, backing up. So we're headquartered out of MacDill Air Force Base, co-located with CENTCOM, and then we have one field office that's forward in Bahrain at the Naval Support Activity Bahrain, right next to the NAVCENT headquarters. So we're split between those. Provides us a forward presence in the theater, and it actually helps. We'll run 16 hours of operations out of Tampa, and then our Bahrain field office covers our night shift while we're sleeping to have that 24-hour coverage. Our major priorities right now obviously are operate and defend the DODN. This is especially crucial in current times. We've had a lot of activities and late nights with Houthis launching missiles at ships that sink and cut fiber submarine cables. So we've had to do a lot of adjusting things on the fly, a lot of forces flowing into the theater that are in different locations in which you might be readily familiar with. You know, a lot in Jordan, a lot more in Saudi Arabia, where we don't have a huge presence. Secondly, our next priority, we're doing a huge modernization effort. The SWA network hasn't been upgraded since 2017 with the pivot to the Pacific and the funding, and there wasn't a lot going on, so we assumed some risk there that now is catching up to us. So a massive effort to kind of revitalize that network, get off of low-speed TDM and other things, and then start to support some of those further afield sites. The threat has changed over the time. Obviously we were focused on Al-Qaeda, terrorism, nation building, those types of things in Iraq. Now every one of our sites in Arifjan, Bahrain, Al Udeid, every one of those are in the threat rings for Iran. So now everybody's looking to the west. What are we going to put on the other side of Saudi? What are we going to put in Jordan? So that's kind of reorienting where we're postured. Also in line with that, there's been a big effort. So EUCOM handed over Israel to CENTCOM under the Unified Campaign Plan. And I think it had a good paper plan, and then October happened, and then we realized what we needed to do there. So we turned an episodic training network into a warfighting network pretty much overnight, in shifting that. And then finally, similar to Jared, we do have a huge input into the op plan, com plan development. A lot of that stuff had been dusty, or as we like to say, or moldy, as everybody was focused on terrorism, but now a lot of effort to go back and rethink how we do that for defense of those nations with the Iranian threat.
Thanks, and thanks for those comments. Again, I'm going to come back to the DISA director's keynote speech today, and he referenced 200 plus capabilities, and so DISA is always surging forward with and fielding new capabilities while we're working really hard to meet the needs of combatant commands. And DISA is always working to deliver those agile, resilient IT and cyber solutions that can be deployed all the way out to the tactical edge. And so kind of with that in mind in those comments, I'd ask if we kind of go back this way. So I'm going to ask a slightly different question to DISA Global. But as a strategic enabler, that's really the face of DISA capabilities for combatant commands. Most of you kind of talked about this, but can you elaborate a little bit more on how you really stay connected to the needs of the combatant commands as those sometimes change, and the assigned forces for those combatant commands at not only the strategic level, but kind of considering the strategic, operational, tactical level, as this is kind of looking at those capabilities that we are looking to field all the way out to the tactical edge. We'll start with you and we'll go back this way.
Yeah, so I would say for the U.S. CENTCOM AOR, those of you who are familiar with General Corelli, he's an innovator, he's loud and proud, and he's willing to test and experiment all the time. So in order for us to remain in touch with that, it shifts daily on some of the priorities. We're embedded with the J6. Our watch sits half of the watch floor in the J6 to provide kind of a combined picture to the J6 and to the combatant commander. And then we sit in every one of the forums, every one of his update briefs. We're in a lot of the boards, bureaus, cells, working groups, just to try to glean anything that's of interest that we need to bring back to the headquarters to allow us to start to pivot in that direction. Specifically for us recently, they're experimenting with a lot of COP tools, Common Operating Picture tools, VJOC, Maven, Advana, all these kinds of tools. Those are not DISA products, but it's how do we get our data into that. So a lot of focus for us recently on API development, how do you get MADS data, other things in so that he can have that picture up in headquarters. I hope that answers it.
So very similar to CENTCOM at the COCOM and theater service component level, we are also integrated into their battle rhythm. We attend their morning stand-ups from the J6, sit through those, brief, provide updates on circuit actions, things that are happening on the network, make sure the J6 has situational awareness of what's going on across the theater on their networks, as well as updating the theater service component 6s for areas that are specific to them and challenges they're having. We also sit through the Admiral Paparo's operations and intelligence update, so we understand at a higher level what the 6 is trying to accomplish, what the intent is, and to make sure that we can posture ourselves appropriately to be able to support that and not be caught flat-footed. So that's the COCOM theater service component, kind of operational, borderline strategic level. At the tactical level, or slightly below the operational tactical level, our field offices are integrated with U.S. Forces Korea, U.S. Forces Japan, Joint Task Force Marianas, Alaska Command, and then down in Okinawa with 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force. So the largest command on each one of our land masses, they're integrated with them. And then in Australia, we are synced up with the Australian version of DISA, which is the DNOC, located in Canberra. So having these relationships, sitting there, understanding what their requirements are, feeds into our planning, feeds into our signaling for what we need DISA headquarters to do and how we need to posture. And then over the last 2 years, we've been doing an initiative that we call Tropical Barricade, where we take military officers and enlisted from DISA Pacific, and during key periods of the year, push them forward into the first island chain to support key activities for integrated deterrence that the Indo-PACOM commander is executing. So at that level, we're going much, much further down the chain at a tactical level. And I feel that it's working because we're getting a lot more requests than I can support with manpower. And we're getting demand signal that, hey, I want your rep in my morning stand-up. I want them to brief. I want them to explain what's going on. I want them to be my conduit back to my watch floor. So that's how I know it's working. I also think it's working because I'm having fewer outages. They're killing an outage when it starts, or they're preventing something. And they're doing that by signaling to me what is really happening, what can the commander, the local commander, really not do, and what is the priority for the fix action, what matters most to that commander and that unit. So that's been extremely helpful pushing them out and gaining better situational awareness. The other benefit we're getting from that is our plans right now are constantly being reevaluated. Everything we have is written in pencil, and we are rethinking what we need to look like across every one of our services. All of our services are going through dramatic changes right now, which means our O plans are going through dramatic changes because our capabilities are constantly evolving. So understanding what they think they want to do right now and where they see themselves moving to, we get a better idea of what that looks like by being with them during these key operations, activities, and investments that are going on in the theater. Because we're told at Indo-PACOM, we're not really doing exercises, we're doing integrated deterrence. We are posturing, we are threatening, we are showing capability, both the joint force and the coalition force. And when we're not doing that, we are rehearsing an O plan, and we're doing it in the enemy's backyard. So understanding that and being aligned with them right now in competition better informs us, and it gives that joint coalition force the confidence that we're here in competition. We will definitely be there in crisis and conflict, and they get used to working with us. We're not figuring it out once the bullets, or in our case, the missiles start flying. So it improves our situational awareness that we can then feed back to DISA headquarters to signal what the demand is in theater. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Jared. So for us in Europe, our main touch point is the EUCOM J6. They're our main customer. We have regular touch points with them, both with the standing up of our EUCOM field office and also weekly and bi-weekly meetings with them to the J6 with the components. In addition to that, it's a team effort. We've got several large signal organizations within EUCOM. We've got NetCom Europe Forward, which is our partner. We've got the J6. We've got the component G6s and A6s and N6s, and then we've also got the Security Assistance Group Ukraine, which is the donation center for 20 nations coming together to support that effort against Ukraine. And they have a 6 who requires communications not just from us, but also on a coalition partner side. So it's a pretty challenging environment. We don't have the tyranny of distance as much as the Pacific does, but we still have a number of components, and so we have a number of touch points. And one of the ways that we approach that is with regular conferences, the J6s, between AFRICOM, which of course is also headquartered in Europe, and EUCOM host a Senior Communicator Symposium, or an SES, twice a year, where we talk about our challenges and try to work through them. And also NetCom has their theater synchronization review twice a year, where we compare our efforts and understand what our challenges are. As DISA Europe, we are also working an initiative called DISA X, or the DISA expansion, to address the need for communications on the eastern flank. So we work closely with that with our EUCOM field office and our customer support there to the J6 to determine what their requirements are and what they're going to need as they expand easterly. We also have touch points with the J6. They're trying to stand up a theater network control center. And so we support that effort by providing some expertise and some visibility over the network. And then last, we also participate in the large-scale global exercises, the planning conferences with UCOM J6 and the cyber side to work the communications and cyber injects for those exercises. It's a secondary training audience, so it's not like we're taking the network down during a large-scale exercise, but we are exercising and talking about what would happen in a DDIL environment and trying to expand that every year as we go forward. Thanks.
Thanks so far for those comments. I think as you hear the commanders, you can kind of get a sense of just the aggressive nature that each of these units has in terms of really taking it seriously and understanding just the impacts that DISA has with the combatant command, just how important it is to understand their needs and really bring that best value to our mission partners. And so as we go to DISA Global, as a global enabler and an enterprise service provider, how can you talk a little bit, Colonel McDaniel, about how DISA Global supports the combatant commands in conjunction with the field commands and everything that they've talked about, and kind of how you have that global view on a daily basis?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Colonel Schmidt. I see Colonel McNeil is in the background as our J5, and so I will start there because it starts with the strategy and vision for the agency, and then we use that to drive what our priorities are. And in those priorities and in that strategy is combatant commands, and DISA's role as a combat support agency is at its core. And so that really is the starting point. And so hopefully I can get a thumbs up from Colonel McNeil from that one. Okay, good. All right, passed. But it's and that's the long-term piece. And then DISA has operationalized that strategy through a series of annual orders, and so that is another component of it, and that drives our priorities over a certain time period. And so we are leveraging those in order to make sure that we make our priority decisions. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're looking to determine what is our priority in current operations. And so, as you'd expect, we drive those through the J3 and the agency. Those are coordinated across all of the field activities in our field offices and field commands, as well as the rest of the agency. And so that drives a lot of our prioritization of effort. And so but it doesn't happen without a lot of good communication. And so communication across a series of partnerships. So that first series of partnerships is with our fellow field commands. And so we have very strong organizational touch points from operations to the other functional areas that we support through our organizations that we leverage. We also have tight organizational touch points with our headquarters, whether it be from the J-staff elements or from the program executive offices on the acquisition side. And then finally, we have tight partnerships with mission partners that we support. So military services, DoD agencies have representatives that actually sit on our operations floor and help inform how we're making those priority decisions. So it's a very complex equation, but it starts with the strategy, and ultimately it really boils down to creating those good communication touch points so that we know that we're making the right decisions with the best information that we can. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. And so he just mentioned the 5, and so if you think about DISA's J357 and kind of what that means in, I'll say, layman's or common terms, is operations, plans, strategy, exercises, the readiness of all of that across the agency. And the 357 directorate in DISA, aligned with the field office field commands, really gets after a lot of the things and really puts us in a good position of advantage in terms of really kind of getting after some of the things that Colonel Vanetta was talking about in terms of planning and looking at what is it that the combatant commands are going to need. Now, not everything comes back to necessarily a warfighting mission, but that's where our primary focus is. But there's also other general support missions that DISA has in the combatant command AORs. And so that doesn't always come back to kind of a 357 and field office field command, leading the effort on that. There is a whole of agency approach that DISA takes to making sure that the capabilities are understood, or the requirements are understood, and the capabilities are delivered in a timely manner based on some of those. So I'd just ask, if we kind of come back to you, Colonel Snotter, anticipating needs of combatant commands is obviously really important, and you guys have already talked about some of the ways that you do that. Can you talk a little bit about how you leverage the supporting efforts of the entire agency to enable the needs of the combatant command, and really how you kind of work with the entire agency outside of just the 357?
Yeah, no. So if I base it around the priorities that I laid out earlier, so I first and foremost, the man at the far end of the table here truly controls the world for us. So we are in constant contact to keep that network up and operational at all times. All those service offerings, trying to get ahead of those things. We've done a lot of work in efforts in partnerships to get away from customer as a sensor and start to actually have some dashboards and be able to provide situational awareness to the combatant command well before. We already know it's happening, we're already working it, rather than getting the dirty looks. In terms of the agency, one of the things I really enjoy in this role, my brother and sister commanders, the ability to cross-talk about, are you seeing this over here? Is there a best practice? And then we can apply those. And then General Skinner's given us the flexibility to reach anywhere in the agency. So we're not super stovepiped. I can reach over and I can speak directly to the DO's PMO if there's a concern, or to answer a service level question, or I can talk to one of the acquisition PEO transport to talk through timelines and projects of how we're going to modernize the network, where do we need it, how do we, and then the DoD IT contracting office, we have a great partnership, constantly forward out doing engagements with regional vendors to try to understand what's available and then mesh that with what the combatant command needs or wants. And so it's really truly a team effort. I mean, while we're predominantly ops focused on a day-to-day basis, it's this constant, I leverage the agency every week to go back and advocate for things. General Carrillo, what are others doing? What can be brought down? And then across with these guys.
So I think the key part of Cliff's question is the anticipation part. I don't think there is a communications officer, signal officer, IT officer, cyber officer, whatever you want to call it across the services, who is successful if they're waiting for the commander or an operations officer to come and spoon feed them a requirement. I think it's incumbent upon us as commanders at DISA to be looking at what the COCOM and the components are doing and start to figure out how we as DISA support them. So I tell my staff, it's not, I'm from DISA, I'm here to help, what do you need? It's, I'm from DISA, I've read your O plan, I know where you're going, and here is how I'm engineering my network to support you best. It's a conversation at that point in time. We give them something to shoot at, something to start manipulating from, vice making them do all the thinking. So we're constantly looking at it and constantly adjusting how we think we need to support. And then we feed that information back to our key elements, who are basically our acquisition and PEO offices back here, who are doing the building or the set the theater part of our mission, and help signal to them where we need to set priorities. And I think that's going to be very key in the Indo-Pacific theater. God forbid we get into a fight. It's going to be different than what we've been dealing with the last 20 years in the CENTCOM theater. This enemy is not going to allow us time to show up, align ourselves, get in place, build, and then look to our left and right and say, are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, now we're going to go. We've had that opportunity the last 20 plus years. I showed up in Iraq early, right after the start of the conflict, and we were an analog network. And that enemy gave us the opportunity to transition quickly to where we should have been on a digital network. Our current threat is not going to allow us to do that. The speed and the violence of this next fight is going to be unlike anything our generation has ever seen. We're going to be going up against an existential threat. So what we need to be doing out of the field command is signaling those requirements so we can set the theater pre-hostilities, pre-conflict. And ideally, what we're doing right now strengthens integrated deterrence so we don't even get to the point of crisis and conflict. But having that relationship right now with headquarters so they know what is really important. I'll steal a quote from our Marine Forces Pacific commander who I've worked for several times. He likes to tell us, keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is warfighting. It is command and control, it is contested logistics, and it is closing kill chains. Other things are important, but they are not the main thing. That is what we are seeking to do. That is what we as an agency are seeking to do on behalf of the Indo-PACOM commander and our components in theater. And in reality, it is a team sport because this will be a global fight.
Thanks, Jared. I think you took most of the words out of my mouth on the first half of it, of how we anticipate capabilities for our combatant commanders and how, as an agency, we have to come together as a whole to collaborate and synchronize the support of those requirements. We know what the combatant commanders want. The commander wants to be able to talk to his people, see what they're doing, and make decisions based off that data that is turned into information. We have the tools to do that. The combatant command knows what they want. We have to help them articulate how we do that technically and then deliver those services and those platforms. That's what we have to do in order to meet their demands. In addition, when you talk about the global fight, it is a global fight because if the Pacific kicks off, our focus is going to go to the Pacific, which means our adversaries in CENTCOM in Europe are going to see an opportunity. So we need to bolster ourselves in those theaters with network security, with network service delivery, and with redundancy to be able to support those combatant commands to keep the peace and security while there's another fight going on in another part of the globe. So, and also when it comes to, I do want to touch a little bit on how we do that collaboration across the agency. A very good example of that is PEO transport. We interact regularly with PEO transport. There are partners in modernization and also redundancy. Dots on a map, making sure we know where there's transport when we need it, and enough to meet the demand. So we work very closely with that office, and it is absolutely critical that not just PEO transport, but we have J6, we have Global Services Division, we have the GSMO, we have multiple directorates within the agency. We have the hosting and compute, the J9, we have DITCO. A number of those entities work in my building, and we have daily contact with them. So synchronizing that across all those different efforts, funneling that into the field office and field command so we can direct those resources accordingly in a synchronized, collaborative manner that everybody understands what each one of those divisions and directorates is doing is absolutely critical to ensure the best, most effective, efficient, and cost-effective method of delivering our services to our customers at their point of need. Thanks.
Thanks for that perspective. I mean, I think as you guys hear them talk, you could probably imagine that from an operational perspective, on a day-to-day basis, things can be pretty dynamic based on everything that's happening across the globe and as that funnels back into DISA. And of course, DISA Global, you're a key part of that. And as a field commander that supports, again, as we talked about, all the combatant commands and partners with other operational entities across the agency, could you talk a little bit about how you balance that dynamic nature of things happening on a day-to-day basis, along with how you're continuing to also field improved DISA capabilities to enable the larger Defense Information System network?
Hey, thanks, Cliff. And just kind of back to the previous response, it really starts with the strategy and gets driven through operationalization and orders, and then day-to-day priorities through a J3-like process, or very much like you'd see at any other operational unit or any other operational command. I think looking at the future, DISA Global in particular is uniquely postured back to that deliver and defend mission. Our team delivers and operates the network on a daily basis, and we defend the network on a daily basis. And so we see things in real time, and that gives us a unique perspective to look at the mission that we might not always get from a programmatic side or from some other parts or other views. And because of that, I think there's a unique responsibility that we have to be innovative with the way we think and offer new ways of thinking and doing things. And so I think our team does a really great job of doing that, and I think the agency has empowered us to do that. And so, if we see process changes that need to be made in order to do things better, those are things that we'll take initiative on and do those types of things. If we see technology opportunities for to operate the network better, we'll work with the program executive offices to what could those technologies be and how could we implement those. But those are things that we have a unique perspective on because we're doing the mission day to day. And so I think it's an important piece that we bring, and we're able to leverage that and use that to support the combatant commands and our other mission partners.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mick. So at this time, too, we'd like to turn it over and see if there's any questions from the audience for any one of the panel members. So if does anyone in the audience have any questions or anything that you'd like to ask any one of the panel members?
We're on.
Anybody ready for the fire alarm, I guess?
For the people who aren't from DISA, what questions do you have of us?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, because a lot of times we talk about a lot of these things on a routine basis inside the agency. So and sometimes when we talk about these things, obviously things that are common to us may not be as common to folks that are outside the agency. So if there's anything any questions regarding in those regards, and anything we can clear up or anything that doesn't necessarily make sense or something we want to kind of add a little more information to, please. Sir.
Well, I did have a question about whether you guys are seeing a capability demand signal that. Thanks. Do you guys see a capability demand signal that seems to be common across the different COCOMs?
Yes. The common operating picture, a unified network, so we don't have to figure out how to get Army to talk to Air Force, to talk to the combatant command, to talk to Navy, and then also along those same lines with our mission partners and our coalition and allied partner networks. So it all comes back to seamless communication and being able to command and control the network and fight the units that need to fight.
And to Colonel Klein's point, all of that is articulated in CJADC2, Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control. We have 4 separate service initiatives to do combined joint. We're violating the joint part of that, command and control. We have to start unifying to that single well, actually not even network, but data-centric environment. Nobody cares about your service network, okay? We care about the data. The data is how you do the C2, contested logistics and closed kill chains. It's very stovepiped and fragmented right now. I think each one of our COCOMs had a separate but very, very similar initiative to better do fires across our disparate networks. And now it's going to grow up and be a truly joint thing and service all of the COCOMs. But that signals the demand that, yes, we are too stovepiped and fragmented. So that's a common theme across the entire joint force.
And that's a good point, because I think we hear that a lot in these conferences and a lot of the different forums and discussions that we have is really the need for enhancing the data environment and then also common operating pictures and the unified network. And as the director talked about this morning, again, coming back to his keynote speech, he talked about some of the things the service is doing, but then what DISA is really focused on with combatant commands and providing capabilities that really get after that over the next few years in terms of our ability to help create that unified fabric so that we can really operationalize the data and make good use of it, as Jared just pointed out. So again, our field commands are really instrumental in that and helping us understand the basic requirements that we get into the agency, but then how do we take those basic requirements and then use things like their strategy and our annual base order as we begin to prioritize those efforts and then put those things into play across the globe in the combatant command AOR. So thanks for the question, sir. Really appreciate it. Any other questions?
I would add to that, Cliff, just real
Go
quick.
ahead.
If we can prove to the combatant commands that we can provide those services as DISA, as a combat support agencies, they would be happy to let us do it and free up their resources that currently do that to do other things and other functions within that command. So there's a lot of opportunity to provide that service to the COCOMs and to those commanders as an agency. And they're hungry for it, they're looking for it, they're just not certain yet that they can let go of that control within their formations and hand it over to us.
But when they do, we'll be ready.
We'll be ready.
We'll be ready.
So both EUCOM and INDOPACOM have done globally integrated exercises where it spans multiple combatant commands. To have that global fight, you need that unified environment that you can all function off of. There can't be a EUCOM solution and a PACOM solution. So when Diane talks about the fight starting in INDOPACOM and then simultaneously something kicking off in EUCOM, we got to be able to sync. And we cannot do that in disparate, separate stovepipe networks. We have to have the same view, the same look at the network, and the same ability to see to our forces and apportion assets appropriately. We need to improve on that.
Thanks. Sir.
To what extent is your staff have dedicated staff members to be able to develop AI capabilities?
I'll start with Colonel McNeil.
Yeah.
Or McDaniel, excuse me, Colonel McDaniel. Yeah, in the back, Colonel McNeil.
No, let's go to Colonel McNeil,
Another
yeah.
plug for Colonel McNeil.
That's a great question. So I would say there's a lot of AI that's already baked into a lot of products that we use, right? And so, from a practical standpoint, understanding how we use the products that we already own and are using in other ways, So I think that's, for us, for DISA Global, that's been one of the things that we've been focused on. And we've had some success there, leveraging some AI capabilities that are built into common products. I think back to the innovation piece, I think that we've got to be able to look for opportunities on problems that we can solve with AI. I think cybersecurity obviously is an area that's ripe for that. Also, we think there's some opportunity for that on the NetOps side too, and management of our networks. But it starts back with, and this is nothing you have not heard before, but it starts back with the data. So we've got to get our data into to a place where we can start to leverage some of those technologies and do that. And I think we've made a lot of great progress on that over the past 6 months or so. And then we are literally every week we're finding new ways that we can leverage that data. Maybe not in an AI capacity per se, other than what I mentioned up front, but finding new ways that we can use that data, and then being smart enough to look for opportunities where we could call in, for some experts, or call in from the headquarters and get some help on applying maybe some more novel concepts and technologies to some of our problems. So thank you.
I don't think I have a role on a daily basis with developing AI. I think we work with service components, the COCOMs, that are working with vendors that are doing that. AI and machine learning is the cool new thing right now. I tell my staff it's kind of like the Ferrari that the COCOM and the service components want to buy. My effort is focused on making sure that that Ferrari can drive on nicely paved roads and bridges that are not washed out. The infrastructure is in place to truly leverage that. And that's not always the case across the far-flung Pacific. So I'm going to do the blocking and tackling piece, if you will, make sure that transport layer is there. And then we also make sure we can house our data, because that's the two things I focus on in my theater. Where is my data located for the components and the COCOM? And do we have the transport infrastructure in place to always access that data, even during time of crisis and conflict where we might be facing potential DDoS scenarios? Because most of our data resides in CONUS. So that calls for a very, very robust transport infrastructure. So not as cool as AI machine learning on a daily basis, but if you don't have that infrastructure in place, you don't get rid of that legacy TDM architecture that's still lingering out there, you don't upgrade to higher bandwidth across our land masses, you're severely limiting the AI machine learning capability of the service components. Someone is going to deliver that. There's a lot of effort. We have to make sure when it's delivered, the roads are there for that Ferrari to drive on.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I would also add, you could look at it from two different perspectives within DISA. You could look at it from an acquisition perspective, where you have these big requirements that are coming in, because obviously, as panel members mentioned, AI is kind of the hot new thing, and it's what we all talk about. So how are we baking in those AI components? We're taking advantage of new capabilities with emerging emerging technologies that are baked into these new capabilities as part of a larger kind of bigger, broader acquisition process. But kind of in our lane, within our directorate and with the field office field commands, with that really kind of keen, sharp focus on operations. Operationally, I think we're having a lot of good discussion internal to the agency in terms of where are we noticing any gaps? Where are there quick win opportunities to leverage AI and take advantage of some of the things that are available to us in industry, where we can leverage existing capabilities, but then also leverage technologies that are available to us today as we begin to kind of continue to look at those, assess those, and assess where we might have some quick wins to apply some AI solutions focused on some of those gaps.
Yeah, I would just add from my perspective, so no, we don't have dedicated staff that are focused on that, but that is absolutely a demand signal for upskilling our workforce that we are looking at. So as part of DISA's Workforce 2025 strategy, we've been asked to holistically look at how do we upskill the workforce to meet the demands of technology. And specifically for us, as I said at the beginning, General Carrillo is a massive innovator, so we need to be a competent partner when those engagements occur. So being part of the Joint Fires Network, the guide series of exercises, those types of things, you have to have that foundational knowledge. So that's been a focus on us of upskilling the workforce so they can speak and help innovate as we go forward.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Ma'am?
Okay, so I can be loud. I'm pretty good without a microphone.
I think he's bringing you
coming
one.
He's coming.
Earlier in one of the fireside chats, they were talking about leveraging human capital within our organizations and how we are making it more transparent to pull in from industry and capitalize on those skill sets. How is DISA and the field commands capitalizing on the conversion to cyber accepted service and being able to leverage from those industry players more effectively?
Good question. Anybody want to start?
Well, we have a hiring board that's going on during this
Right
event
now.
right now. So that's, I would say, the first thing. We're always looking for new talent coming in, whether it's someone getting out of the military, retiring, or finishing a time as officer or enlisted, or someone coming from college with a STEM degree who you might not know the military, but you know technical aspects. We can teach you the DoD. So I think that's part of it. And then as we modify our networks and we bring on new tool sets, it's going to change, hopefully for the better, how we employ our people. We can employ them much more efficiently and not just throw people at a problem. We can take the people we have and through improved processes and improved tools, use those people more efficiently to operate and defend the network.
Go ahead.
I would say I think we need to work on it, quite frankly. We have the CES, it's been in place for a little bit. We've revamped the codes a few times to try to make it and match it correctly to the workforce. And we have some incentives out there that we've, I think, managed to unevenly apply in some cases. And in terms of recruiting from the industry base, I think that's where we need to work. We need to work on our messaging of what it can provide and what kind of experience they can get out of that will help them if they decide to go back to the workforce. And what it will give them coming in terms of, being part of a bigger team, bigger fight, service to the nation, some of that patriotism that goes along with it, because there's so much talent out there. We cannot compete on the financial side for many of those skill sets. So we've got to message it in a different way to say, this is what DISA can do for you, and this is what it means to work at DISA and provide your expertise to the nation, to the global infrastructure, and keep America what it is. I mean, that sounds kind of cheesy, patriotic, but it's very true. So I think we can do a better job of messaging, and I think we can do a better job, particularly when it comes to trying to hire directly out of universities and out of some other areas, maybe not universities, but programs, STEM programs, high schools, and those types of areas. So I think we need to work on it, is the bottom line.
And thank you for the opportunity to say DISA Global Field Command is a great place to work. We have locations at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and Columbus, Ohio. So if anyone is interested in DISA Global Field Command, we have lots of opportunities. I think to the question and to Colonel Klein's point is, I think it will be an evolving learning experience on getting the incentives right and keeping the incentives balanced with what industry is doing and what other opportunities are out there. But at the end of the day, there's two things that I think that we have to have in place. We have to have onboarding mechanisms to onboard talent at multiple levels throughout the organization. So all the way from the developmental level, all the way through the senior level, to be able to bring in talent. And then I think the second piece is we got to make sure folks understand the mission. And I think our team does a really good job of that. And because it's so important, and people want to work on an important mission, and people want to work in a place that is fun to come to work to. And so if we can hit both of those things, we've already got the important mission, we got a fun place to work, people will want to work with us, and we'll get great people in for this mission. So it's a great question. And again, DISA Global Field Command is a great place to work if anyone is interested. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, in addition to everything they said, I think we also need to be comfortable. We don't have to sign somebody up for a 20-year career. I mean, you should be able to flit in and out, work on a technology, go back to academia or industry. So that's on us to help. We got to train people quickly. We need to take best advantage of it, but we also need to be comfortable with people coming in and out.
Thanks for those insights. They're really great. I just echo some of the commanders' comments, and say I think a couple ways too are just really kind of focusing on the fundamentals and basics of hiring and recruiting, making sure, kind of some of the points that Diane brought up, that even some basic things like descriptions are updated to make sure that they're kind of capturing the attention of that workforce and that human capital that's out there. The retention and recruiting bonuses, some of those things, and then also basic things like hiring fairs, making sure that DISA's been doing, putting a lot of effort into that recently with our focus on our workforce and making sure that we're really engaged in some of those hiring fairs. And even here in the continental United States, we also have been working with our field office and field commands that are globally dispersed on ways we can get them included in some of those to perhaps find people who want to take some of their openings and positions and get them out to their locations too. So I think basics and fundamentals, and also kind of listening to the human capital that's out there that's not in DISA yet, and then kind of understanding what they're interested in and trying to hook them and bring them and get them tied into what sounds cliche, but it's really not. It's that sense of patriotism and wanting to win and be a part of a team that fights and wins. But thank you for that question. It's good. I think we have time for about one more. Is there any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you guys for being here today. We really appreciate the comments and the questions and the discussion. And for the panel members, I would just like to thank them for their service. That sounds cliche, but at the same time, if you think about what commanders do and the service and the extra surge and the 24/7, just keeping it on all the time, them and their senior enlisted leaders, and really them serving their team and making sure that their people are taken care of first and foremost. You can see that in every one of them on a daily basis. And so they're a really rich treasure that we have in DISA, to have this kind of talent and the dedication that they have, not only to this mission, but making sure that we're not just thinking about today, but thinking about the future. And so I would just like to thank all of you for your insights and for what you do on a daily basis. We really appreciate you, and just hats off to you guys. Thank you.